A reoccurring theme thus far has been light tanks with bad armor, but trust the French to do things differently. We'll be taking a look at the thickest armor you can get at 1.0 with a low tier rundown of the H.39. So you think you're a heavy tank driver, eh? Well, you've got some grinding to do. Proper heavies don't appear in any tech tree before 2.3 at the absolute earliest, and the real headline, world-renowned super weapons like the Tiger II and IS-3 are all around 6.3, and that's a long way away. But what if I told you you could get a taste of the heavy tank experience on a fresh install of War Thunder? Well, you can, with this thing here. Now, it's not that the armor is super thick, only 40mm for the hull and turret and 45mm for the turret face. It's that it's thick enough to be useful. It's my bet that when you hop into the H.39 for your first runs, you'll be horrified at the number and variety of vehicles that can punch straight through your front plate, and you'll be left wondering if I even drove the tank I'm supposedly reviewing. To make better sense of the situation, we need to talk about a fundamental technique in War Thunder: angling your armor. This involves rotating the tank such that an incoming shell will not impact the vehicle at 90 degrees, but rather at a much more shallow angle. Why? Well, the benefits are twofold. By reducing the angle of impact, you increase the likelihood that the shot will ricochet rather than burrow into the armor. When you look at any info for any shell in the game, it lists the angle at which it's guaranteed to ricochet. Notice that this has nothing to do with the thickness of the armor being fired at, it applies in general. This is why angling your armor is a good idea, even on thin-skinned vehicles. The second reason is that if the shell fails to ricochet and does burrow into the armor, it has to punch through much more material to penetrate. Think about it. It needs to traverse the thickness of the plate along a longer diagonal path rather than the shortest route through as it would with a flush hit. Anyway, if that didn't make any sense at all, then never mind, you'll just have to take my word for it. Here's the general idea. If you know that you're about to get shot at, rotate the tank so that the corner of the vehicle is towards the incoming shell. Very simple. Be careful not to over-angle. This will cause you to expose your weaker side armor to the shot, which will get you killed. When in doubt, it's better to show more of the front than the flank. Okay, so angling your armor will make the H.39 much more survivable than it would be otherwise, so incorporate it into your play. What else is good about the tank? Well, the turret performance is fine, rotating at 11 degrees a second with 13 degrees depression. Other than that, it's not the best. The gun penetration is okay at 50mm at 100 meters, but the old lack of decent ammo types rears its ugly French head once again. Only one shell type, solid shot AP as we've come to expect. The H.39 is also the first example of the other major issue with the early French tech tree: small crews. Of the 13 vehicles available at rank 1, only 2 have a crew of 4 and only 4 have a crew of 3. Everything else, including the H.39, have a driver and a combination commander-gunner-loader. Because the roles of the 3 crew are being done by one person, it slows the vehicle repair rate, track repair rate, and most importantly the reload rate, meaning you can only fire the gun once every 5.6 seconds. The 2 crew also mean that if either is killed, the vehicle is immediately destroyed. With it being a small tank, the takeaway here is that if you get penned, you die. Lastly, it's not very quick, max speed 36 kilometers an hour, but with decent acceleration. I would never call it nimble, but it's not sluggish either. Alright, so how to make this tank work? Well, you want to be brawling for sure. The gun's penetration and the vehicle's speed mean you will have limited success trying to flank or work at distance. Move into built-up areas where you're more protected from long-range fire, as you always want to know and then angle your armor towards the next incoming round, rather than being ambushed. When you take a fight, work the enemy's gunner first, then chip down the rest of the crew. Due to the slow reload rate, you should try and angle your turret between shots. Same idea as the hull, just look away from the enemy so that the corner of the turret faces their gun, then look back and fire after they've shot. A very important note, because this is a French vehicle and therefore cannot be explained easily, the H.39 is way stronger on its right side than it is on its left. A vehicle that's angling can be weak in the corners, and these very fashionable Art Deco recesses on the left side of the hull and turret provide 3 corners for the enemy to shoot at, rather than the single corner on the right side. Finally, and this is advice for any heavy tank driver, don't wander off alone, stay with your team. You're protected by your armor, sure, but there's always 2 components which are not behind the armor, tracks and your gun, both of which can still be destroyed. Should that occur, you'll be left stranded and defenseless, being pecked to death by a dozen lesser vehicles until an enterprising tank destroyer comes along to blow the front plate out the engine compartment. The H.39 can be a pain to play against. There are several vehicles like the American M2A2 or the Soviet T-60 which literally cannot penetrate it anywhere, angling or not. If you're driving such a vehicle, your best bet is to bust the tracks and gun as just described, or better yet, avoid the fight altogether. If you have a decent cannon, you want to aim for the driver or commander's vision slots. They're the flattest and thinnest parts of the tank. If they're angling, aim for the corners. The hull and turret are cast, so they're a fairly wide target. Don't get flustered when fighting the H.39. The gun is pretty garbage, so you should be able to take a few hits and have the time to aim a good shot. Remember, you'll only need 1 penetrating hit into the fighting compartment. Lastly, if you're driving a large vehicle, you can ram the H.39 to prevent it from angling and force a flush hit. Right, the low tier rundown rating for the H.39. It's worse than average at a C. While it does capture the essence of the heavy tank experience and introduce a fun way to play, it's far too brittle with only 2 crew and is let down by the mediocre gun and shell. Thanks for watching. Next up are the Americans with the M2A4 and the LVTA-1.